I am Claire Mitchell, Doctor of Laws and King's Counsel.
And I am Zoe Venditozzi, Doctor of Laws, teacher and writer.
On the 8th of March 2020, International Women's Day, we launched the feminist Witches of Scotland campaign. The Witchcraft Act, in force between 1563 and 1736, saw thousands of people, mostly women, accused and executed as witches in Scotland, in the country's biggest and most brutal miscarriage of justice. Our campaign had three aims: to get a formal state apology for those accused of witchcraft, to obtain a pardon for all those convicted, and to get a national memorial to remember those involved in the Witchcraft Act.
On International Women's Day 2022, the first of our aims was realised when First Minister Nicola Sturgeon issued a formal state apology to those accused as witches. The first formal state apology ever. We are currently working with politicians to ensure there is legislation passed to pardon those accused as witches, to change their status from convicted witches to those who ought never to have been prosecuted. We continue our work to obtain a national monument so those who suffered will never be forgotten. Join us as we speak to the experts on the witchcraft trials, both here in Scotland and further abroad, as we explore the history of women in Scotland and continue the cultural conversation of what it means to be a woman. Hello and welcome to the Witches of Scotland podcast. Somewhat ridiculously, this is now episode 76 of 6. Luckily, it's no longer poor David that's shackled to this. Now it's poor Lola. But this is a great amount of podcast episodes, Claire.
Yeah, what I really love when you say that 76 is the real strong enthusiasm that's coming through.
I am nothing if not committed.
It's the energy.
Fancy footwork, that's me. So today, though, we have actually got a belter of a guest. I have to apologise from the get-go because it's just me talking to our guest today because it was an event that I did at Burnham Book Festival just at the end of last year, round about sort of Halloween time. And because our schedule's been completely insane, that's why we're releasing it now. So it is just me that's speaking to our guest. But, you know, I tried to be like Claire. I tried to be like...
How do you try and be like me? What facets do you bring out? The giggling?
I know I was very legal. There was a lot of legal chat. I was actually very serious.
As if for...
I said "milady" and "my lud" as much as I could. I felt that was a good approximation.
Absolutely. I'm never away, as you know, from addressing everybody as my lady and my lud.
But let the record reflect that I did try my best. Okay. Anyway, so Claire.
Yeah.
Claire, do you have any news?
News. Oh my God, that was a bit sharp, but it's because I'm a bit overexcited, so I'm a little bit
excited. What is your news today?
I mean, what isn't in the news, Zoe, is the question we really have to ask. Okay, so since the Tartan episode where we explained that we had commissioned Claire at Prickly Thistle to make, along with us, to design along with us, a Witches of Scotland tartan, the world has gone mad for it. I think that's just the technical term for it.
It's not actually an exaggeration. I mean, we released, we're both holding our head in our hands at this. We released the Kickstarter with the first selection of things. So it was a scarf and the A4 piece and the throw, thinking, you know, we'll be delighted if we get these sold. We'll set a £5,000 target because that means that there's enough that's coming in that Claire can then make some of them, even if we don't sell all of it. So we kind of pressed go on that one. I pressed it at something like 7:20 while I was eating my porridge. Yes, Scots do eat porridge for their breakfast. And within 45 minutes, we'd sold out. Like, we'd got to the £5,000 like aim that we had. So Claire and I were phoning each other going, what within 45 minutes? And then insanely, within 12 hours, everything had gone. So we did panic stations to Claire up in Inverness at Prickly Thistle and said, Claire, what can we do about this? And Claire said, don't worry, girls. She's very reassuring.
She was the calm head of tartan production. She was like, calm yourselves.
You'd want her in charge, I tell you. So she said, we can do another run of the same amount. So the first lot will be ready in which month, Claire?
The first month will be ready end of April, start of May.
And then the second lot, because of course this isn't fast fashion, this is a small operation that's making proper tartan from scratch. So it's not a big quick operation, it's a big long operation. So the second bunch will be ready in,
July?
I think it's July. And
We're
like,
hoping
Claire
July.
and I got a very quick crash course into what it is to have a successful Kickstarter. Now, I have to say again, for the record, and it's going to sound like a stock record at this point, it's just me and Claire. There's no backroom team, there's no marketing team, there's no intern. It's me and Claire, right? So
Yeah.
all the emails, all the socials. So we were answering things on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook Messenger, and our Facebook wall. Plus, I was getting all the emails because it was my email address that was used for the Kickstarter. Plus, people were also emailing the Witches of Scotland website, which we don't use and we're switching over. It's been wild. So we were getting, and WhatsApp. So we were getting very, very bombarded heavily while still going about our actual jobs. So remember, I'm a teacher, so I'm in class all day, and Claire is a lawyer, so she's in court all day, and it's just been absolutely crazy. So
Yeah.
we have had people from all over the world saying to us, I've missed out. How can I get more? So all we can say to you just now is keep watching our socials because that's where we'll release what we're going to do next. As we work out what we're doing, as two sort of unwitting, now it seems to be tartaneers, as Claire's coined the term.
We have become unwitting tartaneers.
Yes.
And unwitting with the emphasis on wit, we're not having very much of that. So you're seeing in real time two women crash coursing in how to run something when something becomes when people become globally interested in it. But here's the important thing. See if we don't get back to you or haven't got back to you, we're really, really sorry. There's hundreds of emails incoming and we are trying to respond to everything we can. If you're really keen on some particular issue or idea and haven't been able to contact us, try again, because maybe if you try again, we'll be able to
Yeah.
spot it.
But
We are
there is no tartan kicking about in a back room somewhere that we're just not releasing. It doesn't
no,
exist yet. They haven't even started weaving it yet. And
no, but
because Claire Campbell does like a zero waste, everything is accounted for. There's no like offcuts or anything like that.
yes,
Everything
yes.
that she does is complete and in itself.
But let me tell you, we have been told by Claire that she's ordered 3/4 of a ton of threads. So he's just shaking her head at the very idea.
Wild.
That we are ready. She is ready to go to Loom. That will be happening very soon. We will keep you updated on our socials when we actually see. Can you imagine actually see it being
And I
printed?
think
Printed? No, not printed.
woven,
What's the word?
woven.
Woven.
I
Woven.
think on the Kickstarter page as well, so all the people that have bought things, I think this is what's happening. Claire is going to upload video and photographs of the process too, so that if you've made a pledge, that it'll be followed on there. So I mean, it's wild. Bear
Yeah,
with us. We're
absolutely.
just two
The,
women trying the
there's
best.
two women, two innocent women, as we always say, Zoe. We
Yeah,
always try and get in the word innocent as well, just, for any future trials. And we just want to also say that people are asking us constantly, will there be more tartan? The answer is yes.
yeah.
But it's not a fast process. Claire has to make sure all her looms are running and there will be more before the end of the year. So stay on the socials and we will let you know when the next lot is coming. We're also trying to work out how we get you kilts, which a lot of people have asked for. That work is ongoing at the moment and we're arranging that. So kilts will be coming. We'll be discussing bolts and threads and how we decide to go ahead with that at a later stage. But that yes, there will be more tartan.
We just need to say as well that we have noticed, we'd already seen ourselves, but a couple of people have got in touch with us to say that there are some, what I'm going to call rip-off items on
Yes.
places like Etsy. So we're trying to kind of raise a complaint about that. So just to be super, super clear about this, we, Witches of Scotland, have the copyright and the patent on this tartan. So if you see somebody else producing it elsewhere, it's not us that's doing it. It's not okay, right? It's not
Yeah.
authentic. So we're doing that very, very deliberately so that we can have the tartan made by Claire's company in the Highlands by her team of 15, 14 of who are women, so that that is kept in business and that we're doing our bit for that one, because we really like her ethics and the way that she does things. We want it to be made in Scotland. So if you see it elsewhere and we're not making it, then it's fake, basically.
Also, yeah, let us know. Please do let us know,
Yeah.
because we will complain about it, because, you know,
We're
this
trying
is
to really
important.
protect this. We want to make sure that this is something that's looked after, and that it doesn't get, get used by other
Yeah,
people for something. But we'll
yeah.
update more on that. We do plan to do different things, but I mean, obviously these things all take time and we need to work out what we're doing. Okay, Claire. Any other news?
Nah.
Would that were true. Claire, the next piece of news.
Okay. Okay. The next piece of news is the book is coming out on the 15th of May, 2025. I'm looking because if I said the wrong date.
No, that's correct. And
Okay.
you might have just seen a look of horror pass over my face, Claire, because it's less than 2 months. And there's just so much to do. I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed, I have to be honest. I could do with like a therapist or something at this stage. But we're going to be doing lots of different events, and there are different ways in which people can pre-order the book, aren't there, Claire?
Yeah, so we are doing events and we've got lots of them in the diary, and we have to make sure that we can do all of them and they all work out with our work schedules. So we are doing those. One we do have confirmed close to our own home, Zoe, is the Dundee Literary Festival from the 12th to the 14th of June.
From the 14th to the 16th of June. Are you
Oh,
doing an extra couple of days beforehand? You probably are. You probably committed us to doing some sort of bloody fucking, excuse my language, dinner sort of show cabaret for 2 days beforehand. Claire,
I mean,
please
I
tell me
know.
you've not organised anything.
I know. I think Zoe is at this stage. One time I picked up the phone to Zoe and she was like, "What now?" I was
What
like, "I'm
now?
totally
What are we doing now? Honestly. So it's the 14th. Hang on. Is it the 14th to 16th?
You see, this is why, Zoe, we're not great at these sorts of things. The Dundee Literary Festival is coming up soon, ladies and gentlemen, in June.
Definitely mid-June. It's definitely mid-June. My friend Anna Day that runs it is gonna maybe strangle me for mangling this so badly. Oh my God, that's April. Hang on. June. Right. So it's from, I think, the 13th maybe to the 15th or 16th. It's that weekend anyway. So we'll update with correct dates. It's definitely that weekend. It's 100% definitely that weekend. So we're doing that in Dundee, which we're really excited about because it's kind of like our home turf in many ways, because it's where Claire and I started the campaign from. I still live near there. Claire sometimes still lives near there. So it's where a lot of our friends and family are. So that'll be a really nice one. But there's lots of them. If there's an area, if you're somewhere and you'd like us to come and do an event, let us know, because we've got some in London, we've got ones in Glasgow and Edinburgh, I think Inverness, near Dundee, we've got some in Fife, but we don't really have anything sort of out with London and England. And I think that we maybe need to see if anybody wants us to come and see them there. So if you do, give us a shout, because it'd be really
You'd
nice.
imagine somewhere like Pendle or something like
Yeah,
that.
I
They
would have
would
thought so. And I'm from Lancashire originally. I don't go on about that, but that is where
Lancashire lass.
I lived there for 5 years.
Listen, hang on, you're code switching so fast. At the start of this, you were a Scot eating porridge.
Listen, I'm modern. That's all you
Modern,
know, baby.
international.
I'm just an
So,
international lady.
the other things about the book we need to tell you is the book is available in Deep Intake of Breath. It is available in the UK, the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. And we're told by our publishers, if you want it in Europe, then you have to go to your local bookstore and ask them to order it from Hachette. Hachette are a huge European group, and they are the publishers, the overarching publishers of our book. Octopus is the local sort of
They're our
group.
publisher.
Yeah, they're our publisher in London, but they're part of a bigger company called Hachette. So if you want it in Europe, go to your local bookseller and ask for your bookseller to get it from Hachette.
Now, one thing we should say that in America, it's a different book. Okay, so it's coming out later. It's coming out in October. We don't have an actual date for that, but we'll let you know as soon as we know. So the book's got a slightly different title and it's a slightly different book because it's a different market, but we'll keep you up to date with that one. And there is one special aspect that we're hoping about the American one, isn't there, Claire?
Yes, we are hoping as well to get the tartan on the outside of it, the outside cask as it's called. We're working on that with publishers. I just really love the idea of being able to take off that top paper bit of the book and to carry around the tartan so people can see the tartan, and you'll be able to be in a bookstore or in a cafe or something. People are like, nah, I know what book she's reading. I so love that idea, Zoe.
It's very
The last thing we should talk about is Porty.
Oh, yes.
So,
Portobello Bookshop in Portobello in Edinburgh, Claire.
yes,
It's a
yes.
really, really nice bookshop. I did an event there with Mary Kidd where I interviewed her a couple of years ago, and they are the nicest staff. It's such a beautiful shop inside as well, and they have just got a really, really great selection. It's a fabulous shop. If you've not been there before and you're anywhere near it, it's definitely worth going to. But not only if you're near it, you can also order, can't you, Claire?
Yes, you can order dedicated and signed books by us at Porty. We've put a link on all our socials. So if you go on Linktree, I think the Porty one's up at the top. That's the dedicated and signed ones. Or you can order from any of the other places below as well. But we've already had an amazing response from Porty, so much so that they've already restocked the amount that they've got once. So if they do sell out, which they did once, they will just restock it. So try again.
It's fantastic. Okay, now is there any news that's not about you and me, Claire?
I don't now listen to any news that's not about us, Zoe.
Claire,
No.
there's loads of terrible things still happen to women around the world. Fairly normal service will resume with our
Yeah.
next podcast episode, but we just had so much that we had to get out because we've had so many questions. So, without any further ado, Claire, what's the next part of the podcast?
The next part of the podcast is Women Not Witches. And what we want to do is we want to remember groups of people that were accused as witches. Now, what we thought I'd do, Zoe, is I'd go into the Witches of Scotland, we've not taken over that. I'd go into the survey of Scottish witchcraft and have a look at the names of some of the people who were executed as witches or accused of witchcraft in the area where Claire's business is, where Prickly Thistle's business is. So what I want to do first is just to read out the names of those people, and then I'm going to tell you a story about one of them very briefly. The names are Lachlan Rattray, George Rattray, someone McQuicken, unknown McQuicken it's called, unknown McRory, they've only got the surname again, Agnes Stewart, Mary Innes, Muir Roy, Margaret Vane, Mo Nain Du McIver, and Beak Homas. I've never heard of a name such as Beak Homas before, but
That's
that is one of
an
the
array of
people
names, by the way.
witchcraft. Sorry?
That's an amazing array of names.
It is, it is. Sadly, we know very, very little about that other than the name which appears in the list in the survey. We don't know any more than that, which is a great shame. But one of the ones that we do know a wee bit more about, but only ever so slightly more, is Lachlan Rattray. We know that Lachlan Rattray was involved in a trial at the same time of George Rattray. They appear to have been related to one another. The trial says that it took place in Inverness, on the Presbytery of Inverness itself. And annoyingly, as ever, Zoe, it has not recorded what was the outcome of the trial. Similarly, there is no information recorded about other issues for the unknown McCrory or the unknown McQuicken. Mary Innes, however, we have a little more information about in relation to what it was said that she had done. She was said to have been involved in witchcraft trials and that she had been involved in magic. Now, when I say magic, of course, the ideas of witchcraft had sorcery and they had necromancy. So she was involved in sorcery. The date of her case was the 30th of the 9th, 1696. And sadly, although we know that there were 7 commissioners, one of them called MacDonald and 7 of them with the surname MacLeod, we sadly do not know the outcome of that trial. So those are some of the people in the local area where Clare works in Prickly Thistle who were accused of witchcraft, and sadly history records very little of what happened to them other than their name.
Thanks for that, Claire. Now, our interesting, fabulous guest today is one of Scotland. I mean, I want to say like the most famous and well-known Scottish folklorist, who's Dr Margaret Bennett. I was absolutely delighted to speak to her at the Burnham Book Festival. So this is quite a nice kind of fairly organic chat that's just generally about witches and things that Margaret and I just touched on. So I hope that you enjoy this nice relaxed chat. So now I'm going to introduce Dr. Margaret Bennett. I would say one thing, there's a strange ghostly bit of music that comes in and out through the whole recording. It's recorded live in front of an audience, and I wasn't aware of there being any music when we were doing the chat, but I can hear it now on the recording. It could be in my mind. So if you can't hear it, the problem is probably with me rather than with you. But anyway, please enjoy this chat that I had with Dr. Margaret Bennett.
Ladies, gentlemen, children, and everybody, a very warm welcome to the Burnham Book Festival here in 2024. Thanks so much for coming to support us for all the events we've been having over this weekend. And we've been so excited about this particular event. I want to say right at the beginning that it's been sponsored by one of our wonderful local businesses on Athol Street in Dunkeld called Kettles of Dunkeld. So thanks to Kettles of Dunkeld and Alistair Wiley for sponsoring this particular event. So it's wonderful to bring this together. First of all, we're involving the hardest working woman at the Burnham Book Festival, who is Dr. Margaret Bennett. Please welcome her. We brought Margaret through and we said, you're going to be busy the whole time, just enough time for quick cups of tea in between. And hosting the podcast is Zoe Venditozzi. And with her colleague Claire Mitchell-KC, Zoe has been fronting up a campaign, Witches of Scotland, to seek an apology nationally, a government-issued apology, a pardon, and eventually a monument in memory of women, mostly women, who were persecuted and executed for witchcraft. So we want to dig into that a little bit, but as you go through their campaign, they've been taking the time to talk to lots of different people with everything that they have to share on the whole subject, and who better than the esteemed folklorist, a Scottish national treasure, Dr. Margaret Bennett. So with that, enjoy. I will perhaps field some questions on behalf of them at the end if they've got time. But once again, a lovely warm welcome for the Witches of Scotland podcast.
This is so lovely. Thanks all for coming out for this today. I'm absolutely delighted to speak to Margaret because we've just been having a chat for the last 10 minutes, and I feel like Margaret's one of those people where you could talk to for about 15 to 20 hours and you wouldn't have to stop, and we could just go around. Now, if you're familiar with our podcast, I'm not going to say it's shambolic, but I'm also not going to say it's organised. So we do tend to go with quite a relaxed, chatty approach to things. I'm not a historian, neither's Claire. Our area of interest is we're just two quite angry middle-aged women that found out about this and thought this was something that needed to be redressed. And it ties into lots of modern things. So today, what we're going to talk about, in theory, it might not go this way, is we're just going to talk about general stuff, about witches that Margaret knows about, and talk about some people that gave her information about their own beliefs and their own backgrounds. So just go with us, and then we might have time for questions at the end, but we'll see, okay? So, Margaret, thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
Thank you for inviting me, and thanks to the Burnham Book Festival. And
Oh, they're
Fiona.
marvellous.
Yes, they are. It's a wonderful festival. Thank you.
It's a really nice festival. So, where should we start, Margaret? What do you think is a good jumping-in point?
Well, I'm quite old, you see. I'm nearer 80 than 70, so I can look back over many, many years of memories. And maybe something that might drift into my mind where I apart from storybooks, you know, the Wicked Witch type stories, which I knew had nothing to do with any of us, or Scotland even for that matter, then the realization, oh my word. And I remember the first local witch story I heard, and I was on a far too long walk with my mother and friends in Waternish. I'm from Trotternish in Skye, that winged island, so it was the opposite peninsula. Never been there before. There's an inn there now, and an old man. I was brought there by the district nurse, and we sat and listened. And he said, "Have you been to the graveyard at Choimpan Head?" We had been. Now he said, "Did you see that stone there? It's got a hole in the middle of it." No. Well, so we had to go back and look, and sure enough, he said, "That's where they tried the witches." Witches in Skye. I was to discover a lot of witches in Skye. I don't mean discover, they just, you know.
And it's really interesting because with Skye, we have got one of our episodes is talking to Catherine McPhee, who's an archivist in Skye, and we were talking about how in Skye there's very little witch activity, but it's recorded witch activity. And I think that's the difference, is that there aren't necessarily written archives about these things because it's something that was talked about privately, but not talked about publicly in a very different way to other parts of Scotland. So Skye had definitely then a witch tradition.
Oh yes, definitely. And I might say, for the sake of the real Lewis people here, I lived in Lewis for 6 years too, and Shetland for a couple, that Lewis certainly had a long, and in all of the islands, but it was all from oral tradition. It was by the fireside. I put some slides together, and at some point, I thought you might like to see the landscape, really, in which we told these stories. It was still the same landscape when I was a child. See, I was going to show you the view from from the house my mother was born in. And so you say, oh, okay, that's very different to being in a very different setting where there's newspapers and everything else. No electricity while I was a child. I remember the first electric light I saw. I think that's also significant as well, because it's all from oral tradition.
It's atmospheric.
Oh, very, yes. And my mother's take on this, they had what a ceilidh, the literal meaning of the word is a visit. And so a ceilidh house, my grandfather's house was a typical one. People would gather there, usually when daylight had fallen, and they would sit round and talk. And my mother said if they went to somebody else's house, oh, we'd be scared to go home. And her sister said, oh, we'd be walking one another back home all night because we wouldn't go back home again alone because they were so scared by some of these stories. Well, and some of them had witches.
I can imagine. You know, I think it really lends itself to that idea. So just to be clear, when we're talking about witches in Skye, are we talking about witches as we often think of them in the modern day being kind of benign herbalists that might give you some idea with your love life? Are we talking about the kind of witches that were persecuted and executed because they were very much in the service of the devil?
I think the whole range. There were some who were helpful, and there were some you better watch out because that person has a mean streak. There were wizards as well. And
the difference with a wizard?
He was a person, a man.
It's just purely down to being a man.
And there's a tradition too that there's sort of known wizards, like Michael Scott, the Wizard of the North, and the odd stories are attributed to him. How would you know? People discuss, when's Easter this year? You'll have heard them. When's Easter this year? And they go, and then you ask somebody. They used to say, ask Michael Scott will soon tell us he would have ridden his horse to Rome to ask the Pope's wife. Is that not a wee bit of a paradox? I didn't know she had one. And so people thought he'd come back with the date of Easter and that was it. But then again, that was not how it was worked out. That was just something people hadn't thought it through.
Yeah.
But there again, not going back so many centuries as that, when you think about Walter Scott's, even his short stories like The Drover's Tale, he describes the drovers coming down from the north and over the furthest reaches, wherever they were in the Highlands. Yes, down here, past Dunkeld and through to the Crieff Tryst. And in the autumn, round about now, the cattle would have a little braid of a rowan in their tails to keep away the witches.
Because rowan trees are significant, aren't they?
Yes, very significant. And I can come to that again.
Yeah.
But this also being Halloween, what about now? The costume for Halloween, as you know, don't go to Tesco or Asda or whatever, they're selling these darn things. But anyway, they didn't sell costumes, they made costumes, but they weren't generally witches. Now, my thought on this would be, they believed, and the belief was that that was the night from the old Celtic New Year into the new. So November the 1st being the new year, the night before, the Celtic we all start the night before, as we do with Hogmanay. That's the custom, starts the night before in the dark. So that's Halloween, All Hallows Eve. And if there are malevolent spirits coming back, they will come back that night. And the talk was, and so will the witches. And if they're going to do you harm, just because they have some grudge, this is the night. So people would disguise so they were not recognized by those returning spirits or the witches. Mm-hmm. There's a lovely recording made by John Lorne Campbell of Cana when he was living on the island of Barra. And because anthropologists will tell us, they will conclude, like in Fraser, the Golden Bough, there's lots of conclusions and they're not proven. So how can we prove that that's really what they thought? Well, this is my, if you like, one piece of evidence. An old man, he was a fisherman, and he was, long since hung up his rubber boots and his oilskins. He was over 90. And Halloween came round, and all the geysers came in. Now, the geysers, in my mother's day, they would use burnt cork to blacken their hands even, so your hands were disguised, or wave something, and they would blacken their faces. Yes, they had all kinds of garbs, but it didn't have to be witches. Well, in they came, en masse. We would go out, whole village of us, house to house, in Lewis. You might remember that.
What was that called there? Was that guising there?
Guising, it was called guising, yes. And I'll show you a picture of what some of the guisers wore. And this photograph was taken on the island of South Uist.
Now that's what costumes should be.
Now that's costumes, isn't it?
That's
and now it's
terrifying.
Yes, and they're made some of the things out of skulls, which is again a kind of a bit of a hint at the dead. And,
bit of a hint.
Yes, and actually, when I was putting this together, I thought, I know, Margaret Fay Shaw took that, and she lived in down near South Glendale, and North Glendale, sorry, in South Uist. So I thought, I'm going to phone Paul McCallum, who lives down there. Paul, I said, your folk lived near her. I said, have you seen that picture? And, I know the one you mean. I said, any idea? No, he said, I'll tell you who that is. That one there is my uncle, and that one there is my father, he said. Yes, and he's a lot younger than I am. He's a good 10 years younger than I am anyhow. So we're not talking about something from hundreds of years ago. So that's how some of the costumes were, just as long as the witches wouldn't recognize you. But back to this, another island south, Barra, the man that Margaret Fay Shaw married, John Lorne Campbell, he was collecting fieldwork in Barra, and he was there one Halloween. And they were going out dressed, in all kinds of things. And in this stomp, you don't do your own, you don't talk in your own voice, you make a new voice like this, so nobody will know who you are. You guys, your voice as well, you see. And in they came. And the old man, the old fisherman, he nearly fainted. They thought he was, dear, he's having a heart attack. But no, they offered him a dram. He didn't even take that. He was just white, ashen. And he was breathing fast, and they couldn't figure out why. Anyway, the custom, you guess, this is so-and-so. Oh, yes, I know who that is. Morgan, I know those feet anywhere. They do all this stuff. You go, darn it, I should have worn something else. One by one, they unmasked. And one young man, he was 18, and he was dressed in fisherman's clothes. And when he unmasked, the old man just about fell off his chair with relief. This young man of 18 was dressed in his grandfather's clothes. He was a fisherman. He'd hung the stuff up in the old boat shed, and it had been gathering dust. It was full of holes and raggedy, and he put it all on, sou'wester on top of the mask. And this was he died that year, that very year. So, wore the old man's clothes. And sure enough, the old fisherman and the other fisherman had fallen out more than 60 years ago and hadn't spoken since. So if anyone had a grudge against him, that was that old fisherman. He died that year, and he walks through the door on Halloween, hence the horrendous shock. So you don't need to be dressed as a witch to have the implications that it's to do with the dead and spirits, etc.
Yeah.
But it's quite something.
We're so different to some other cultures, aren't we? It's not a sort of a celebration of the dead exactly, is it? It's kind of a fearful, I don't know, what is it? Is it behave yourself while you're alive? Or?
Well, I mean, some people, you know, you need to give, I never heard the phrase trick or treat. That's very, very new and American.
I'm a school teacher, and when the children this week have been talking about going trick or treat, I'm like, you are not American. It's guising.
Yes.
Have you got a joke or a song or something? No.
Oh, well, that's the thing. This is what, you know, our global world does. But maybe we can, I think the past helps us understand the present just a bit. And also the respect of witches, of that kind of witch. But they were normally, the fires were at Halloween to burn them away. Now you say, wait a minute, there's Guy Fawkes now. It's only Guy Fawkes because our school classroom books told us so since the Education Act of 1872, the Scottish Education Act, where everything had to be according to the English Education Act, and Guy Fawkes was part of the history. Oh, well, we'll just burn him at Halloween.
We have to have his history. Because it's interesting, when we started the campaign, Claire said to me, it was Claire that started the idea of it, and she said to me, you know, because of all the things that's happened in Scotland to the witches. Now, I grew up in Fife. I was like, what happened? And Claire was kind of like, well, and then told me the story, and I had absolutely no concept of witches in Scotland. My family obviously don't pass down stories, and they don't have that kind of culture. They're more likely to talk about people sort of in the street than, you know, do you know what I mean? So it wasn't that kind of useful oral tradition, so it was completely news to me. So while doing the campaign and speaking to people like yourself and historians, I didn't know that Scotland had this incredibly rich past with witches because we weren't taught it in school.
No, I think it probably wasn't taught in any schools, but you may happen to grow up in an area where it happened. Just a quick slide here of the man who recorded the story, John Lorne Campbell, and his wife, Margaret. She took the photo of the Halloween geysers. But we have vestiges of it today. We live near Comrie, and those fire festivals, that New Year they happen, or most of them do now, except Burghead, which is the old New Year, 11th of January. But that is, if you like, a repeat of, if you like, saning meaning purifying the boundaries of a community to keep the community safe. And the old people would say, well, that keeps the witches away from our village for the rest of the year. And so on it goes. And if you live in Perthshire, you will have seen this. A reminder that witches were persecuted. I don't think a lot is known about this one and why she was burned. But every year, that little white painted sign gets repainted. I wonder who does that. We don't know. We don't know. But it's not anything new, or it carried on long past that. Everybody used to love Burns's Tam O'Shanter, but he himself says this inspiration came out of what he heard in childhood. And his mother's, the nursemaid, had so many stories about, oh gosh, they're all listed here. Devils, ghosts, fairies, brunies, witches, warlocks, spunkies, kelpies, elf candles, needlers, wraiths, apparitions, cantrips, giants, enchanted trower, dragons, and other trumpery. Well, now, there you are. That's enough for at least one poem.
Yeah.
But also, he himself, in some ways, and Jean Armour were the subject of a kind of a witch hunt. When you think about how they it was, you know, his poem, Holy Holy's Prayer, it doesn't mention anything to do with witches, but the hypocrisy of the church elder who followed himself and Jean so that he would then report on what he saw and then have them kneel before the stool of repentance and so on. And that feeling that, you know, this is a witch hunt, that phrase, I think it, but there are other, oh yes, talking of the ministers, this minister here, he was from Argyll or Tiree, and this book, I think, was banned because he heard those stories. He wrote them down, a lot of them from Tiree. But if you go to Tiree today, you'll still hear stories about witches. Yes, and what they did. One of my, as a folklorist, I've tried to record the tradition, an audio recording, starting off, yes, with reel-to-reel tapes, and now the digital minuscule stuff. You don't need a barrow to carry in the gear. But one of my favorite recordings is of this man, we'll go past that. This man here, isn't that a great character face?
It's such a great photograph.
Yes. Jimmy Macbeth, he's better known as a singer of songs like Tramps and Hawkers, because he certainly had a lot of experience in both tramping and hawking and working as an itinerant. And he was from Portsoy, and Hamish Henderson recorded him. We thought of playing the tape. It's so broad-spoken that you'll be... And basically, Hamish said to him, "So, Jimmy, with a name like Macbeth, are you anything to Macbeth, you know, and King Duncan and those folk?" "Well," he says, "and we're probably far back." And so he said, "What can you tell me?" And on he went, and he said, "Well, were there witches?" "Oh, these 3 old hags," he said. "No, I'll tell you where that happened. And they had spells, you ken." "So we're witches." And he said, "You ken that road up ahead Strathpeffer?" I don't think that comes into Shakespeare, does it? "Well," he says, "I can take you up there and show you where they met, and they had a coven." And on it went. And it goes on for about 10 minutes, and Hamish said to him, "And so, Jimmy, have you read Shakespeare's play, Macbeth?" "Is there a play about it now?" That being oral tradition, and that's just a transcription of the thing. But this man here, I didn't ever meet him. He died before I ever got to Tiree, but he's well recorded. And if you're interested in his stories about witches, you can find them online in the website called The Kist of Riches, or the Toparantulkas. And he had so many stories about witches and what they did. There was a terrible fishing disaster in the mid-1800s, and lots of boats lost, and he was absolutely convinced, totally convinced, that the storm was caused by witches, and that's why all the boats capsized and everybody was drowned.
So whether witches of the order that interfered with King James's bride being able to come across from Denmark.
Yes, and I don't think he even would have called them weather witches, in as much as he thought there was definitely people in this world who had a malevolent streak.
Yeah.
And if they didn't get you this way, they would get you that way. And if it meant that you were out in a boat, watch out.
Yeah.
By the way, when you have a boiled egg, does anybody ever turn it upside down in the egg cup and then go, stick the spoon through it? Did you ever see that? There you go. Were you told why? Or did you, as I did, I just did it because my mother did that, and my grandmother, and I liked the sound of it. Scrunch.
So you hit the top of the...
Oh, no, after you finished eating the egg, out,
Oh.
putting the soldiers in, you know, eating the egg, and there was...
You got the empty shell.
Yes, you turn it upside down in the egg cup and you put your spoon through it. Well, that's so that the witches wouldn't be able to drown anybody. Apparently, the witches, when you threw out the eggshells, could take them, and they could put them on a bowl of water and blow and blow and blow these little vessels. Mm-hmm. And then they would make a little storm, and it would capsize the boat, and whoever's in that boat, connecting by sympathetic magic to the boat out at sea.
So they do it in miniature,
Yes,
and then with the power of their mind would
Yes.
make that then play out on the sea with
Yes.
real people.
yes.
Wow.
I'm going to sing a song about that tonight.
Oh.
I know. A real drowning.
For the benefit of the tape, Margaret's just shrugged. Yeah.
But the thoughts, and it wasn't only in Scotland. I had a student once in Edinburgh from Germany, and she said, my grandmother always said, put the spoon in the egg, and we just did it because she said so. But now, she used to say, put your spoon in your egg and save a sailor. It made no sense whatsoever, but in that
does.
context, yes.
Yeah. And of
Yes.
course, we were only second to Germany for the vigour with which we went after and killed people that were witches. So Germany was the worst in the league tables of international witch murdering, and Scotland came second. Germany also did, I think they killed animals and more children than we did too, believing that they could also be witches. But we were
yes.
mostly focused on women. So
Yes.
I think about 84% of the people that were executed, were accused, were women.
Yes, yes. You very seldom hear. I mean, I did hear of wizards in Skye as well, but somehow.
Were wizards not as sort of persecuted? Were wizards seen as being just as potentially evil, or were they of a different order?
Well, the ones I heard, there was one called, Ian Du et al. He was Black Donald. Black is one of these adjective words, and it can be in English too, in Gaelic, that it takes on a sinister side. Oh, he was a black nature and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to do. Now he was actually quite kind. He used to do good things, but people could not. I mean, they were. It was like he was a magician, actually, a wizard. And then came he was actually in the Merchant Marine. He only died in 1905 or something. We're not talking about hundreds of.
Yeah.
And he'd been in the Merchant Marines, and apparently he had gone to some school of the black arts in Italy, bringing that all back home with him. And he had those tricks that he performed. He didn't call them tricks. They were just. How did he do that? Like he would borrow, it's half a crown from you to buy a couple of drinks for us all, and he would, as he'd empty his pockets, there was nothing there, and then he would get change back, and it cost more, and this change kept going. Nobody ever saw where it came from. At the end, he'd give you back your half crown. And so it was simple things, simple but not. Mm-hmm. He would bamboozle people with, but they were more like tricks. But the witches, I'll bring this on to, you can, if you're interested in pursuing the stories, you can listen to them, and some of them are they're not all in Gaelic, a lot of them are in translation. They have summaries, putting silver or gold. A lot of the stories of witchcraft had something to do with cattle, stealing the good out of the milk. There's a witch stealing the good, or somebody would be churning butter, and the butter would churn and churn all day long, and it never turned into cream, not a bit. And the saying would be, so-and-so witch took the good out of the milk. So they would put here's a confession. My grandmother occasionally put sixpence in the bottom of the milk pail. And yet, she was devoutly religious, free church.
How did those two things sit beside each other?
Seamlessly, apparently. Only you didn't mention it. The same thing with fairies.
I was going to ask you about fairies.
Oh, gosh.
So I've only recently discovered this about fairies. So I don't know what your concept of a fairy would be. Previous to the new knowledge I have, I thought as fairies as being kind of a Tinkerbell type thing, nice little sort of tittering around in the air, pretty, nice little, obviously Disney-fied. But I recently spoke to a historian who said, oh, no. Fairies weren't like that in Scotland. And I was kind of like, tell me more. Maybe you could tell people more about fairies.
It's very true. They could be nice, but they weren't little Tinkerbell creatures. That's the way. And everybody seemed to believe in fairies to a certain... In the late 1600s, a minister in Balwhidder, and he was also later in Aberfoyle, said, his name was Robert Kirk, he said he saw the fairies on the hill behind Balwhidder Church.
And that's a minister saying
The
that?
minister, yes, the minister. And gosh, these fairies, he described them, and they weren't dressed in green, by the way. Some of them were wearing tartan, apparently.
That's one of the stories I've read recently. It's a story of a woman called Elspeth Rioch. Do you know her story?
Not really, no.
So she was when she was 12, she was standing at a loch somewhere up north, and two men were on the loch side, one dressed in black, one dressed in green tartan. And these two turned out they were fairies, and they told her how to tell the future using an egg. So by boiling an egg and then washing her face with an unwashed hand, with the water that was around the egg, wash her face, she could then tell the future. And she was eventually executed for being a witch. But I mean, as a modern day person, she went on to have 2 children quite soon afterwards. And I think the idea of a fairy in this situation is much more malevolent and human than, because there's kids here, I won't go into that story, but she became pregnant by fairies. I think, there's a much more horrible story there. That as a teacher, my child protection hat would be kind of like, my alarm bells would be ringing. But then she became mute, and her brother beat her to try and get her to speak. And she wouldn't, and she'd travel around the country and would sometimes speak and sometimes wouldn't, but all because she'd been given this gift of telling the future by these 2 fairies who were men.
Yes. Actually, there's a book written in Newfoundland, stories collected by a folklorist of women who were enticed by the fairies when they went to pick berries, and there was nearly always a child involved later, the birth of a child, and usually there was the line was, I don't remember what happened after that, but I woke up. I mean, are we talking about a drug like the fly-agaric mushroom, or what are we talking about when I don't remember anything that happened, I just woke up?
Or a trauma response where you just don't remember what happened. Yeah.
But Robert Kirk, yes, he said he saw the fairies, and in fact he was taken away by the fairies. They say that he didn't die a natural death, and his coffin was said to be just weighted down with stones, that he wasn't in it, and that
he'd been taken away by the fairies.
He had been taken away by the fairies. I went to Balwhidder the 300th anniversary of his book, that would have been 1992, and there was an old lady, Mrs. McGregor, we'll call her. She wasn't actually. And I went to see her because my mother said, she believes in the fairies. She really does. I said, okay, we'll go and invite her to tea. But she invited us. We went down and we talked about the weather and everything else. And I said, gosh, I said, living in this glen in Balwhidder, this is where Robert Kirk saw the fairies, didn't he? Yes, she said, and do you know this? She said, we have a minister here now living in the church where that Reverend Robert Kirk lived, and he doesn't believe in the fairies. No, I said. And I said, and he stopped me coming out of church the other day, last Sunday only, and he said, Mrs. McGregor, you have to stop this. And he quoted me that when I was a man, I put away childish things. Put away childish things, she said. He said to me, you believe in God? I told him, I do believe in God, but I also believe in the fairies. And he said, Mrs. McGregor, have you ever seen a fairy? I said to him, have you ever seen God? So what is belief? What is belief? And I think that's something we can look at.
What did the fairies do? I mean, what was their purpose?
Well, they could help you, and there's lots of stories about them. Somebody with a toil-weary task, like spinning something on, mountains that would spin. You get up in the morning and the fairies have been here before you and spun it all. And it's drifted into fairy tale but they would, a lot of people used to put out a little bowl of milk for the fairies just to keep them sweet.
Yeah.
You don't want to tempt the fairies because they could do you a mischief. Mm-hmm. They didn't all, but some of them did. And you could be stolen away to fairyland. And that was more common than I thought. I had a student in Glasgow, a musician. We talked about the fairies. I thought, oh, these Glasgow students are going to say, oh, listen, what was she on about now? And she put her hand up. I said, yes. She said, my grandfather got a tune from the fairies. He was on his way home from a wedding. I said, really? And you know what? We traced the tune and even a recording of it. And a recording of him talking about when he met the fairies.
Wow.
Yes, I can send you a...
Yeah.
It's quite exciting in a way when you see such a seamless garment. You asked me what the connection, church people. Well, have I got a picture of him? Yes. Where are we on our pictures? Oh, this is... I'm reminded of a Sunday in Skye. This is not the community, it is Staffan actually, which is further north. These spaced out houses, and there's always a few ruins, and my uncle and I were going to church. And he had to have a cigarette first, so you're standing at the end of the house. And so it was this time of year with these beautiful berries. I said, look at the Browns. I said, they're still in full berry, and the people who lived in those ruins are long gone to Prince Edward Island. Oh, yes, he said, they're still growing. And he put the fag out and he said, yep, they keep away the witches. And we went to church then. With the same breath, we get in the car and go to church. And I didn't cross-question him, I just listened.
And do you think that your uncle really did believe in such thing as witches and that these really were protected? Sorry, was he just saying that?
Well, here's the acid test, isn't it? Confession. When I moved to Edinburgh, 1983, moved into a flat in Edinburgh. The first thing I did at the end, after about a month or so, I got a little rowan sapling from my mother and planted it towards the gate. And one or two people noticed it. It grew and it grew. I remember Betsy White, the traveller, came to visit me one day. Oh, she said, you've got a rowan at the gate. We do too. I didn't say why. But then one time I came home and my upstairs neighbour had cut it down. And that was the test. I cannot tell you how absolutely devastated I was.
Was she a witch?
I believe she might have been.
Oh my goodness.
I can't tell you how I would hardly have predicted I was capable of feeling so absolutely gutted.
Yeah.
A little tree, I can go and get another one. That wasn't the point.
Yeah.
But it certainly is our sacred tree, and you shouldn't cut them down. If one falls, that's different. You can make rockers for the cradle to lull a child, or you can make a whisk for the milk, or a churn stick.
Yeah.
But those, so that's the landscape. This one here, standing at my grandfather's, that's at the spot my mother was born and looking across the Conan River. And this is the Fairy Glen. And it was a playground, really, and children would be told, well, you know, there's 365 hillocks there, one for each day of the year. And of course, you tried to count them, but it's impossible. Did we count this one? I'm not sure. Well, start again. 1, 2. What a way of keeping children occupied. And you might meet. It really spoke of the supernatural.
Was there not a fear, though, that if you send your children out to play there, that something might happen with the world of the fairies?
Well, a good point. There was a river at the bottom of the glen. That's across the river. So the glen came in, we were on this side, and that was in the other. So that was the view across. We were only allowed to cross on a little bridge, and we had to promise faithfully, you must cross on the bridge. But in my mother's day, they were told about the water horse, which was a very evil and malevolent spirit. And I recorded my mother, talking about this. They called it the Yahushka, the water horse. And don't go near the river or the water horse will get you. And I said, water horse? What did it look like? Oh, for goodness sake, she said, we didn't go near the river, so I never saw it. And it is a sort of a very effective way of keeping children. And then I said, oh, it'd be huge, huge, she said, imagining what she managed to not see. But nevertheless, it was that kept the children away. So did they believe in it? Well, when they were children, they did. But when my mother began to tell my sisters and I the same thing, my father put his foot down. He was of Glasgow Armagh extraction and said, what a load of nonsense. Don't tell the children that rubbish. But guess what? I was of the children of generation who thought anything went, and drowning is what happened to somebody else. So it was, it had its advantages, and I saw no harm in it. That maybe these things are functional if you don't demonize them. And the children who believe. Well, that's on our side of the river, and the other one was, and that's the uncle who said the Rowans keep away the witches. But this is that's my another uncle. He had all kinds of witch stories. Oh my word! And he grew up 3 miles from Portree. I'll maybe hasten on. I won't tell you them all. But he had witch stories from outside of Portree. And and they would start like this. You know that quarry out on the road to Achachork? And you have to say, well, there was a witch who lived there. And then you get this story and this noises of horse chains and you name it. But more up to date, than that, was the fact that, I can't find him. Never mind, there he is. When I was in my teens, I think, he got a job in a diatomite factory in Uig. Yeah. Now, diatomite, one doesn't talk too much about it now.
I don't know what that is. Can you?
Yes. It's excavated from the bottom of a loch. It's like a soft clay. Apparently, it's minuscule insects of millions of years old, and they're squished at the bottom of this 2 lochs and sky. And the lochs were drained, and this stuff was dug out, and it was dried, and in order to make quite a number of things, including face powder, and it was used in glass making. It had a lot of uses. And how this happened, but a German company invested in it, and they brought in machinery because there was a demand for it. So they go to Skye in the North End after the war. There were very few jobs, and Murdo, his name was Murdo MacLean. He was among the men. They had crofts, but you couldn't really make a living to do anything. But it wasn't even subsistence. So he got a job, so there would be money coming in. It was a very health hazard because it was so dusty. Right. So anyhow, it was doomed to fail. But he said, and he told me the whole story of thing. You don't need to have that bit. But at the end, he said, and it was absolutely, they did everything. They brought in engineers, they did this, they did that, the modern technology, but it was doomed to fail. And old Alistair, names him, second name, who lived there, he said, Murdo, I'm telling you this, from the day one, it wasn't going to work because of this witch. I said, and what witch? Well, he said, when they were drained the loch up near Staffin, they put in one of these little railways to carry a wagon to the main road. So it was a track, like a vernacular railway. And they put this wagon so that the trucks could come to the edge of the road, a convenient stopping place, and ship it down to Uig where the factory was. The factory, by the way, now is the McBrain's ferry terminal in Uig. You might have been in it. Then he said, they were putting the railway down, and an old lady in Staffin watched these men starting to lay tracks on her croft, and she came out. She was up in years. To them, she would have looked eccentric, lived alone, quite isolated. And she said, what are you doing? In Gaelic, of course. Anyway, somebody told her, we're putting this track. She said, you can't put that track there. That's my croft. Well, crofting law is very complex. And in fact, in those days, you didn't own your croft. Definition of a croft, piece of land surrounded by legislation. You own the stones in your house and so on. But she said, you can't, and they had gone over her head. They simply completely discounted the fact that she was a human being at all. And they said, we have authority from the landlord. And she said, that's going to be where my potatoes will go, and I'll have no chance to even feed myself if you put that on my croft. And they said, well, it's going in your croft, end of story. And she shook the fist and she said, well, she said, it wasn't just my curses on you. She gave them this great utterance of an almost formulaic curse. And from then on, word has it, one thing after another went wrong, until finally they got the thing going, and the first boat to leave Uig was not half a mile out of Uig harbour when it began to list, and they had to turn back and empty it. And the whole thing went absolutely bankrupt, and to that day and this, people in Uig will say, well, that was the witch. So it wasn't malevolence in that old sense. She wasn't persecuted and she wasn't burned, but she was somebody to be respected, and she wasn't.
Yeah, poor thing. Yeah. What do you think about the modern sort of concept of witches? Do you think that we still in Scotland have these ideas going on? Yeah, you think it's still quietly in some communities?
I'm not even sure. Yes, well, a short anecdote which surprised me no end, because it happened in Tennessee.
Oh.
Yes. This is Fiona's territory, that part of the world in the southern Appalachians. I was there for a semester doing a summer school connecting immigration. It was history, folklore, all of that, songs, lots of songs shared between Scotland and Appalachia. And they had, I'd say very wisely, invited a few guests, and they brought over one of the Aberdeenshire travellers. He was a great storyteller, singer, piper, and he had a way with people. Anyway, when he was coming, the professor running the thing said, I'll just go to the airport. I said, oh, maybe I'll go with you if I may, because he's never been to America, and he'd meet somebody, a real Kent face. So I saw him at the airport, and he was happy to see me, but he could hardly speak. I said, hello, and he said, oh, can you see a little bit? And he couldn't speak louder than that. Oh, goodness, I said, you've got one of those aeroplane coughs or whatever it is. And we get in the car to go back to the university place, and he said, I'll say it in a louder voice than he could. Nah, he said, and he named a woman, witched me. I said, what? And I cannot speak, and I'm not going to be able to speak a word for the next 2 weeks. I said, oh, come on, it's just, a good cup of tea will sort that. And no cup of tea would sort that. Nothing would sort that. And on the way back in the car, I said to him, how do you mean she witched you? I can't find, he said. He said, now we're talking about, 1989. She made a clay doll, and she stuck pins in the throat, and she threw it into a river. And no wonder I can't speak. I said,
what had he done?
That's what I asked him.
That's my first question, yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
I asked him.
I said, make a woman so enraged as to waste her time in some ways to make a little doll and find a river and chuck that in.
Well, this is it. I asked him, I said, but why would she do that? She's your cousin, for goodness sake.
Oh, they're related.
Yes.
Okay,
right. He said she was jealous that I got asked to come here and she didn't.
Oh.
She was jealous. Now, as you know, jealousy is a very unattractive human quality. And if you have to choose one thing, you don't want to be jealous. There's never any good comes of it. And I said, but, she'll get other chances. Oh, no, nothing for it. And she said, so she couldn't go, so she's going to make sure that he couldn't do what he came to do.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, we were staying in the same lodgings. And I had that. I sat down and had something to eat, and I said to him, I've been thinking about this. And I try not to pin it on him. I said, I said, if I'm really nervous about something and I'm afraid this or that or the other is going to happen, and maybe I wouldn't be able to sing that night, or, I'd be in bad voice, I said, it's almost enough to make me be in bad voice. Mm-hmm. The nerves of it.
Yeah.
Do you not think maybe the fear that she expressed jealousy was and incidentally, you'll be glad to know he recovered the next day.
Oh.
So I don't know if he rethought it, but he was so convinced.
Mm-hmm. That she'd done it. And I think sometimes that was the case with the accusations back during the witch trials, is that somebody had cursed you for something, and then you would have a fear because you really believed there was power in that. They did have magical powers, that things then, anything that went wrong in the ordinary run of events, you would then pin that on the witch, and the curse that the witch had given you. Do you think we should give 5 minutes of questions to the audience? Okay, we're going to have a roving mic, so please wait till the microphone comes to you. Does anybody have a question or a point at the front here? Marvellous.
I agree with Zoe that we could all listen to you for hours.
Oh, yeah.
You're an enchantress in your own form. But what do you think is the modern day equivalent of witchcraft?
Well, the modern day equivalent of witchcraft. I wonder if it can come in several forms. I still think that jealousy is something that's quite to be feared, and that when something I can only describe as a vibe or a gut feeling. Mm-hmm. And you may have had experience of this. The same person who went to Tennessee told fortunes, and he said to me, somebody has the evil eye on you. I said, what? This being the modern day, the evil eye? No. And I can truthfully say I'm not one to make enemies. I meet people I was at school with, and they say, oh, you used to get put out for laughing. I was always a little bit light-hearted, and I don't fall out with people particularly easily, or if at all. An evil eye? I said, no, I don't think so. And years later, I'm talking about quite a number of years later, when a few disasters misfell, and I was no longer in the place I had been in, no longer had the job I had, which was quite a nice, prestigious job. And he said, have you figured out now what put the evil eye on you? I said, what? He said, I saw it 14 years ago. I know. And then I began to think, that was, in fact, not anybody who'd ever been unkind to me that I knew of. But no matter what the kindness was, I didn't feel, there was a sort of a gut feeling, and I wonder if that's it. Have you ever been in a situation where there's a vibe? Yes? Well, there you are, you're tuned in. I think the Bible calls it discernment. Others call it a vibe or a gut feeling. And is that an equivalent of witchcraft, that somebody can affect you? They can affect the mood. Or have you ever walked into a room where the atmosphere is, you haven't heard a thing, but still there's something. You're nodding, Fiona. Do you want to come in on that? No?
No, I just think it's very interesting when you translate how people would have interpreted something in an earlier time to how we would interpret it now as being a bad vibe or
bad
energy.
Bad energy, yeah. Said the same thing there, yeah.
Bad energy.
Yeah.
There's Zoe's phrase, which there is such a thing, I think, as bad energy. There's such a thing as good energy, too.
There's a lot of good energy here today.
Well, that's good. That's very
all
slick.
around.
Oh, like yes. Yes, there really is.
Does anyone have one more question?
One more, a little quick question. Now, don't be shy. It's a very warm and lovely company here.
Is anyone from another country that might have a perspective or a question from your experience? Not to
What,
put
you're
anyone on the
all from
spot.
Scotland? Is
Well-
nobody here from... Right, where are you from, lady in the front? Oh, come on. Now that's... I was thinking obviously about Mexico, and I was thinking about our sort of approach to the dead, and of course we may have this wrong and it may have become Disneyfied as well, but we have a perception here that Mexico really does, you know, sort of celebrate and think about positively your people that have passed. Is that accurate?
So it resonated with your perception of that time of year.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is. We are both from Mexico, and yeah, definitely.
Are they,
it's in
what's
our
the word for
culture.
witch in... Is it bruja? Is it...
Bruja.
Bruja, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have like a sense of witches then? Are they still a part of modern Mexican cultural reference?
Oh yes, they are, and they're actually respected. You can actually go to the brujo, which is like a male bruja, a male witch, and you can go and find them, and they will do like a potion for like get your evil eye away or many things. You can actually go, and it's very respectful.
Yeah.
You don't want to mess with them still. You are still scared of them and respect.
And was there a history of witch accusations in Mexico, or have they always been seen as something to be respected but tolerated?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything like here or in Germany. I live in Germany, so I am also aware of that. I don't think we have anything like that because I think it was more, how can I say it? The indigenous people are still really strong in Mexico. So
Before they've been
it's-
colonized
yes,
with
it is.
Catholicism, so their belief originally.
It was either put away completely, and the indigenous people kept their traditions under the water. They put like their figures from their gods behind the altars in the churches, so they will still go there and pray to their gods.
It's kind of behind the veil almost.
Yes.
That there was the hidden,
Yes.
the real religion.
Yeah,
sort
so
of
at
thing.
some point, the colonization took all over, but there are still so many indigenous towns that there's still all of these religions and beliefs, and yeah, it's just part of the culture.
It's fascinating
Yeah.
the way it's woven into.
And so I don't think there's like a judge, like we don't judge like that witchcraft part, and we just
It's just
respect
a part of the landscape.
Yes.
Which sounds like it was kind of the case in Scotland then, that it was just part of the psychological landscape and it was accepted.
Yes, I think so. One of the pictures, we were talking about, one of the pictures there was on a white hair.
We might have to finish on
That's
the,
all
on
right,
the
we
white
can do
hair,
it, we can do
Margaret.
it, yes.
Oh.
Well,
We might have to finish on the bonny white hair. I think that'd be a lot, because they were shapeshifters, weren't they?
Well, yes. This is my mother's brother when he was quite young, and he used to like to go out shooting rabbits, and his favourite was to go down that glen. I showed you the picture of it, and shine his motorbike lights late at night. Can go up in the day too, but it was just they'd see the ears, and he was a crack shot. But he was there with another cousin, and he said, "Stop, stop, 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 stop." He was just a bit hysterical. "If you shoot that one," he said, "you'll see her tomorrow." And he believed, and he said, "That's so-and-so." He named a local woman who was known, he said, for shape-shifting.
Oh my
He did.
goodness.
Yes. But, and that story I recorded a woman in Quebec telling me the exact same thing, and it was attached to church. Here we are. It was in this area of Quebec, Stornay-Vuzaquet, settled by Lewis people, going to church, she said. And she said, we called for another woman. It wasn't Sunday, so she'd been baking bread. She said, go on without me, go on without me. She was going, by the way, to Tulsa, Quebec. And when they got to church, she was there ahead of them. And she said, do you know this? She said, the only thing that passed us on the road was a hare.
Dun, dun, dun.
Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode. Please follow us on all our social media. So that is now, because Claire's forced me to do it, TikTok, as well as the established Instagram, Facebook, wee bit of Twitter, although I know a lot of us are pulling away from Twitter. I'm still on there harassing racists and sexists. Where else, Claire? Is that it?
We're on Blue Sky as well as Witches of
Are we?
Scotland.
I'm
Yeah,
not
we've got
involved with that. I can't do any more. It's too much.
I
Anyway,
mean, see, when you were talking about therapy, Zoe, I was a wee bit surprised because not only are you working at full time, not only are you a mother to 3 children, not only have you written a book and are doing a podcast, but we also forgot to tell people that we're going to be in an upcoming show soon. And I would have thought that with all those things ongoing, what you might be doing was having your raccoon as your therapy, bring them along.
those guys aren't therapists. Are you joking? Oh my God, I work for them essentially. This whole facade that I'm training them, I've had it with them. They're just too hard work. The ravens are so much nicer than the raccoons, but the raccoons are extremely demanding. They don't really understand the stress I'm under. I was talking to them today about feeling overwhelmed, and one of them had the temerity to say to me, was I actually trying to make time for myself, or was I using this as an excuse to be stressed? Okay, maybe I'm talking about my son rather than a raccoon, but it's essentially the same thing. Okay, I've had it. I need to go for a lie down, Claire. And on that, we say goodbye to this week's episode.
So it completely breaks down. Yes, anyway, we're going to be on a TV show called Paranormal on the BBC.
Oh, yeah.
Look it up and we'll give you more information on it at the time. We're going to be discussing UK's, in fact, last week.
Yeah, that's on BBC Three. Okay, see you later, Claire.
Bye. Bye. If you'd like to know more about the Witches of Scotland, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for our mailing list at www.witchesofscotland.com to keep updated with the campaign. On that site, you'll be able to find how to link with us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram.